So we're going to be focusing today on the England years. 1970 was a pivotal year for Alan Hudson. The 69-70 season, you'd just broken into the team. Chelsea had got to the FA Cup final, all was looking great. And then on Easter Monday, you had an injury at the Hawthorns that put paid to your Wembley appearance and also prevented you from being the first teenager to represent England at the World Cup finals.
Yeah. Well, at that time, it never entered my mind, of course. You don't think about things like that. But I think there was so much going on in such a short space of time at that time. I'd only been in the Chelsea team for 6 months, say. And I was just finding my feet in that team. And the closer we got to Wembley for the FA Cup, little did I know, it wasn't until we played QPR in the 6th round, I think, and we beat them, and Venables played and Marsh played, and they had half a decent team. It was a big local derby, and we knocked them out. And that was when Alf Ramsey came out with Osgood scored a hat-trick, which really clinched his place in the Mexico squad. And then Alf come out with that saying that there's no limit to what I could achieve, and that put me in the firing line for Mexico myself.
Because you were in that original 40, you would have gone. And many years later, one of your journalist friends said that when Bobby Charlton did come off in that game, it would have been you, not Colin Bell, that replaced him, because you were really primed, because Bobby was getting a little bit older, and it was you that was primed to take over from Bobby Charlton in that England shirt, wasn't it?
Well, I think Alf would have looked at it in a way that I was young, fit. Had I not had the injury at West Brom, I'd have still been very fit. I was getting stronger. I was the more games I played, the better I was playing. And I think he'd probably see me as having the young legs and having being clever enough to play in that role, and just say to me, you make sure, I couldn't do what Bobby Charlton could do as regards going forwards and shooting and things like that, but he wouldn't have wanted me to do that. It would just have been a matter of going and sitting in there with Alan Ball and trying to keep the ball 2-0 up and stopping Beckenbauer from doing what he actually did in the end, and that was to crucify us.
Yeah, again, many people says that they took off Bobby to rest him for the semi-finals, but when you look at it and you hear and you read press cuttings, it wasn't that. Bobby was tiring, and Alf just wanted to freshen it up, didn't he?
Well, he did. I think that is a question that would never be answered. Yeah. Only Alf would ever, he took that to his grave with him, whatever he was thinking. I think it was bad management. Myself, because if you're 2-0 up in any game and you're controlling the game, which we were, I think we were actually playing better in 70 than what we did in 66. And we proved that against Brazil as well in in that match. But we were controlling the Germans. We had everything under control. And there's one thing you don't do is when you're controlling the game is change things. And that would have meant, even if I would have been on the line, he brought me on. It would have been a wrong decision. I'd have just kept Bobby on there, because even the Germans admitted that they couldn't believe that he brought Charlton off, because as they said in the 66 final, Bobby and Beckenbauer cancelled themselves out of the game, and they did the same in 70. And it was just so happens that we mastered them, really. It was the best we have played in them 2 World Cups, I think. Apart from the Brazil game, which I think we were outstanding. I think it was probably Bobby Moore's greatest game ever. But no, I think Alf made a massive mistake changing the team at that stage.
And again, what confidence it does give the Germans when you do see your opposition's best player going off. It almost gives them a little bit of an adrenaline boost, doesn't it? And I hear what you say, and it's almost like when you're picking your team, if your best players aren't playing, then your opposition looks around and thinks, happy days here, we've got half a chance. Whereas if your big players are on the pitch, it's psychologically game on, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think if you look at if you look at boot on the other foot, the Germans were 2-0 up and they took Beckenbauer off and say Muller or Seeler off, we'd have felt more comfortable defensively, and we'd have thought we can go on and we got half a chance here. Whereas if they just keep them on the field, I remember years and years ago. Well, not that too long after, I played in a game at Chelsea, and we played at Stoke in the League Cup. It was a Wednesday night, and Osgood had a fight, a big bust up with Sexton in the dressing room at half time, and he pulled him off. And Stoke were 1-0 up at the time, and we come out at half time, and you could see Stoke looking round at each other, wondering where Osgood was, and they knew that, they have one less problem, and Ozzy was our, he was our main man. He was our goal machine, and by Sexton pulling him off, he gave Stoke, as you just said, so much more confidence to go on and win the game.
Now, your international career consisted of 2 games, unbelievably 2 games. We're going to get onto that. But your under-23 career, that was, you played 9 games, didn't you, for the under-23s? Talk me through your first game.
I have no idea. I haven't got a clue. I know my first game my first game was my other worst ground, which was Roker Park. Yeah. That was the only time I ever got sent off in one of my last games for Stoke. But that got postponed. That got abandoned through snow. I don't know with how long to go, but it wasn't much of a game because of the snow itself. It's part of the game. I remember that being my first game. I remember a game at Hampden Park, which was with about 20 odd thousand, and it sounded like there was about 200,000 in there. It was amazing. I didn't really play that well. And I remember a couple of games against Wales. One when I came back from a bad injury and had a outstanding game down in Wrexham. And that was a game when Alf said to me after the match, I think you better preserve yourself. You're doing a little bit too much hard work, which I found a little bit... I couldn't believe his words, actually. Yeah. I can understand him saying about players not working hard enough, but I don't think a player can work too hard. But I was just, I used that match as a kind of a comeback and as a fitness test for me, really. And I had a really good game on a really heavy pitch, which I used to like playing on heavy pitches because of my bad ankle.
Now, your 3-year ban, that was towards the end of, was it the 71-72 season? You were still at Chelsea, obviously.
Yeah.
And it must have been before the 1972 game against Northern Ireland. So can you throw a little bit more light on that? Because Bobby Moore had told you that you were going to make your full international debut for England against Northern Ireland, a game that your old adversary Terry Neal scored the winning goal.
That was my first. I think that was my first full international squad.
Yeah.
And Bobby just took me under his wing, and Bobby, I don't know what it was. I think he might see a little bit of George in me, and I don't know. He just took a liking to me, and he took me under his wing, and he came up to me before training. He just put his arm around me, and we was walking across, and I felt quite privileged. And all of a sudden he said, "Well done." He said, "You're playing tonight," and Bobby himself wasn't playing, funnily enough, and And he said, congratulations. And you just go and he gave me a bit of advice about, how to play, just play as you do at your club level, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, we had a little bit of a warm-up, and then Alf called us in, and then he read the team out, and my name wasn't mentioned. And I looked at Bobby, and he looked at me, and he was so embarrassed. And he apologised to me after, and I said, Bobby, please don't apologise to me. I said, you was trying to help me, and he must have changed his mind as he was looking around at the squad. I don't know, right? I don't know what happened, but why tell Bobby in the first place that I was going to play? I don't know. It's another one of our mysteries,
Did your band come after that episode out or before
yes.
it? Yeah, it did.
Yes,
okay,
it
so
did.
that there was all these little things that were leading up to, and obviously, as you'd alluded to earlier, the heavier pitches suited you because of that injury that you picked up at the Hawthorns, and injuries dogged your career. And I mean, even so, many years later, in 1975, Tony Waddington got the Fire Brigade out so you could play again on an Easter Monday because you needed those heavy pitches. That's where you thrived.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a chronic. People don't really know. Not even the doctors knew at that time. And I was going outside the club and I went to see so many different doctors and faith healers and this, that, and the other, trying to find out. I even went to see a fella called Tucker, and he used to look after all the big boxers, and through the fella called Tony Mancini, who was a boxing family. He put my father onto him, and we went to see him. And strangely enough, I went to Bermuda some years later, and he was part of. There's a place in Bermuda called Tuckertown, and he was one of that family. But he was a top man in his field, and not even he could do anything with this injury of mine. I could write we could do an old program on the people I see and how many different kind of treatments I had on it, but it was never going to get better, and therefore it made it near impossible for me to play on hard grounds or anything like that. I just needed the rain, and the greatest thing that ever happened was. Probably my two most famous games were on the heaviest pitches. One was when it rained for 2 days before the West Germany game, and the other is when, as you say, Tony, got the Fire Brigade out before the Liverpool game, which was a big match over Easter. It was a third of 3 matches over them 4 days we used to play in. We played Friday and Saturday in London, West Ham and Arsenal, and then we went back to play Liverpool, the European champions at that time, and I was absolutely gutted. I said to Tony, Governor, I think I'll be missing Monday. It was top of the table clash as well, and he just said to me, no, you won't. He said, you won't. He said, because I've heard the weather forecast. He said, I've heard it's going to rain. And he made it all up, knowing in his mind that he would get the Fire Brigade in, which was another master stroke by him.
But again, that's what it's all about. Managing the person, managing the player, and managing the injury. And that's something that Ramsey didn't do, because he phoned you up at Stamford Bridge and he pretty much ordered you to go to that under-23 tournament whilst you were nursing an injury. And because you didn't, he then banned you and Colin Todd. Malcolm McDonald come with the old back injury and he got away with it. But,
Malcolm was the smartest one of the three of us because he knew they couldn't detect a back injury. But that's what happens when you're honest. You see, if you're honest, you get nowhere in the game. And all I done was being completely honest with him. But it was just the way he done it. I think football's no different from any other walk of life. I was just told to be at Stamford Bridge one day about 2:00 to expect a call from Ramsey. He was calling me from about a mile away. when he could have asked to meet me somewhere and sat down, had a cup of tea with me or a cup of coffee or something, or even a glass of wine, and said, "What's your problem?"
Yep.
And we could have talked it through. I mean, that's what Waddington would have done. He would have said, he would have called me in his office, or he'd have took me out to lunch and said, what's the problem if or my phone was out? He would have asked me, communication is everything. And Alf was just so, he was like a school teacher talking to a child, really. And it was, if you're not at Heathrow there tomorrow, you'll just I'll never forget the words. If you're not at Heathrow tomorrow, you'll just take the consequences. And I can remember coming off the phone to him. I can remember walking back down to Christine Matthews' office in the Chelsea office itself. It was pretty. It was like walking through death row, really. And it didn't really hit me until I got to her, and she said, "What did he say?" He hasn't really told me anything. He just said, "I got to take the consequences." And Christine, being her, she said, "Well, you are a silly boy. You should go." I said, "Look, Christine, you don't understand. Nobody understands. You get an injury like this, you just don't go and play them for anybody with a bad injury. And I need the rest, and I did need the rest. We had a long, hard season, and I was thinking of trying to rest it and thinking about the following season. And the England under-23s at that time with the father thing, if it had been a full international, I just wouldn't have been able to play. So, it was just the way he treated me. He treated me like I was a kid, and there he was just 3 months earlier saying there's no limit to what you can achieve. And if you looked at any other country in the world, it would have been like, if I'm 18, 19, it would have been like Holland, kicking Cruyff out, for banning him for 3 years, or in Argentina as a kid, Messi or Maradona, you say you're banned for 3 years. Colin Todd was probably our best young defender, the replacement of Bobby Moore at that time. It was the perfect replacement, and there he is banning our best young defender as well. So. And then they wondered why we didn't qualify for the World Cup for the next 10 years or 12 years. And that's where it all began. I'm not saying it was us too, but you do not ban your best young players. I mean, look at what's happened since in the World Cup. We're crying out for young players to come through and break through, and you encourage these young players to come through. You don't treat them like they're, juvenile delinquents, or they're doing something really wrong. I did absolutely nothing wrong, and looking back just 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm thinking how the game has changed. You got Rio Ferdinand failing a drugs test or not taking his drug test, and he gets 9 months. And I thought, Christ, what's going on here? Only because it was Ferguson who behind it all. And I thought, it was just Ramsey. I think because he won the World Cup, he kind of put himself up on a pedestal to actually do anything he wanted to do, and it was wrong. I should have been brought in front of a committee of some sort and asked questions of why I didn't want to go on this tour, which was a friendly tour. It wasn't even like they do today, a World Cup, under-21 World Cup. It was just a friendly under-23 tour, and my ankle just wouldn't have took it.
We're just interrupting you a little bit here. Gary Tibble said it's great to hear Alan Hudson. He also said Alan should have played more for England. I think everybody agrees with that. And Mossy says, hi guys. Great listening to Alan Hudson as always. Now, Bobby Moore, let's talk briefly about Bobby. My opinion is with great captains, they almost win you things rather than the managers, because they're the ones on the pitch. And the way I looked at 1966, had Bobby Moore not have played for England, we probably wouldn't have won it. We did have, yes, some world-class players. And then when Alf's time is running out, I think the ideal, looking back, and it's great to have a crystal ball, but I think having Bobby Moore managing the England team and having some input in the England team would have been instrumental to the development of the younger, more maverick players that the establishment overlooked for a generation almost.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think as young players look up to people like Bobby. It was Bobby, but Bobby was more than just a great player. The likes of Bobby Charlton. You can't say the same thing of, because Bobby was a different character at all. But Bobby Moore was more like a Franz Beckenbauer in Germany. The way he handled himself. He took over the team there. Johan Cruyff taking over the Dutch team. I'm not saying Bobby Moore would have been a great England manager, but put him some kind of position and bring. I think he would have been a great England manager if with someone like Don Howe as a coach under him.
Yep.
Bobby knew the best players in the country, and Don would have straightened them out. I'm not a lover of coaches, but Don is the only one I can actually say I've ever played under that did anything worthwhile in training. But he never told you what to do. He just organised your defence, and yes, I agree. I mean, and nobody's ever mentioned that Bobby Moore. I mean, the way Bobby was treated by the FA was shabby anyway. It was terrible, and I think the same goes for West Ham. The way they treated him was awful. To let him leave and go to Fulham like he did after giving such service to them. I mean, they got to 3 finals in 3. He I think he probably the only man who got to 3 finals in 3 years. By winning the FA Cup with West Ham. Then they won the Cup Winners' Cup the year after with West Ham at Wembley, and then the following year I think they won the World Cup.
Yep.
So he's gone up them steps 3 times in 3 years, and now you can't get no greater experience than that, and doing it for West Ham as well. And West Ham treated him as if he was just another player at the end of the day. And then you got the likes of Trevor Brooking, who gets a job with the FA. Yeah. Now, that doesn't add up.
But as a person as well, what was Bobby like? Because, he'd set you guys under the wings, and not only, on the training field, but down to the pubs. And Bobby was part of the scene, wasn't he?
If you can imagine knowing Bobby, and he's won the World Cup, he's done everything in the game there is to be done. Yeah. He's revered by everyone, and if he walked in the pub and you're in the pub, he was just another one of the lads. But he was always immaculate. He was always immaculately dressed. And he was always one of the lads. He was never put himself above anybody. He was modest as anything, and he was always there for advice for anyone. And for me, he was terrific right to the end. Even before he died. The last time I see him was at a Phil Collins concert, and me and Phil had a drink together. And
when I'm feeling blue, take a look at you, then I'm not so blue. When you're close to me, I can feel your heartbeat, I can hear you breathing in my ear. Wouldn't you agree, baby, you and me got a groovy kind of love.
And Phil Collins just couldn't take his eyes off him. It was like he was talking to some kind of god. But he was just the most wonderful, wonderful man. My man was Waddington, but he was a manager. But he was the most wonderful man as a footballer that I ever met.
You were having the time of your life at Stoke. You were in the 2 PFA Team of the Year in 74, 75, 75, 76 season. And it was in the 1975 season, in the March, that you had the call-in from Don. And that was largely due to the press and due to Tony Waddington saying that Alan Hudson will play for a World 11 before he plays for England the way he's going.
Well, he did that. I was in a couple of squads before that West Germany game, in which he could have picked me.
Yeah.
And one was, I remember one was Yugoslavia's. I didn't even get on the bench, and I knew he wasn't going to pick me. And then all of a sudden I thought to myself, hang on, we got Germany coming up in a few weeks' time. That could be the game he's going to pick me because he thinks I'm not going to be able to cope with it, you know. And me and Bawley spoke about this, and he caught me and Bawley out once or twice when we wouldn't play bingo and carpet bowls on one particular day. And we've been out along the street having a few drinks, and we weren't allowed to drink. And he warned us about it. And that was the game before the Germans, and he made Alan Ball captain for the Germany game, and he picked me. And me and Bawley looked at each other and we smiled as much as to say, this is our bit, you know, our chance. And I mean, Alan Ball already won the World Cup as a kid, you know, so he had much more experience than Don Revie about how to win, you know, international matches. And it was just great. And that photo of me and Bawley coming off the field just about painted the picture, didn't it? Really, you know, it was great. But yeah, the reason I did get picked in the end was because of Tony banging the drum for me. I played a game at Tottenham. Stoke beat them 2-0. I scored. I played outstanding that game, and it was the first time Stoke had won there in 100 years, and I'll never forget all the, you know, the Fleet Street gang were outside and Tony was talking to them, and then I see that quote on the Monday saying that, you know, that I played for, you know, how well have I actually got to play to get in the England team? You know, I will play for the World 11 before. You know, he was having a knock at Don in the nicest possible way, because he wasn't the kind of man to point the finger at anyone, but he was just stating a fact. What the hell did I have to do to get a game, you know?
White Hart Lane was your favourite ground, wasn't it? Your dad used to take you there to watch the great Tottenham team, and also used to take you to Arsenal to watch the wonderful George Eastham as well.
Well, Chelsea supporters may hate me for saying this, but White Hart Lane was my favourite ground. Outside of the Victoria ground when I played there for that period of time. But White Hart Lane would always be outstanding. Yeah, my dad would take me there, me and my brother, because that was when they had the first ever double winning team. They've had the best football team. We all have Jimmy Greaves. John White played inside right. He always took me to see great inside forwards. The great Dave Mackay. I mean, Blanche Flower. That was a one, and it was always packed out. And my dad would finish work. I mean, he worked for himself anyway. He was just a window cleaner, and he got off work this day and he said, "Come on, we'll go to Tottenham." And then whenever Arsenal were home on a Wednesday night, he would take us over to see George Eastham, and that was a story that, I mean, that really was an incredible story, because you know, he didn't really used to say George Eastham the best player I've ever seen, but he used to say, "Watch this fella play," you know. And lo and behold, there was George. I was standing next to George when he scored the winner against me in the final, in the 72 League Cup final with Stoke, which I got on my wall. I'm standing next to him as he's scoring it, and strangely enough, Tony see enough, I think, of me to think that I would be the one to replace him. And it was. I remember my first game for against Liverpool and pulling George's shirt on, and knew I had to do something because he was such a hero in Stoke, and I couldn't rubbish his shirt, kind of thing. And luckily enough, it all worked out.
Because one of your other heroes, the great Johnny Haynes, in 1950, Johnny would have been the first teenager to represent England at the World Cups, but in that squad of 22, England only took 17, and Johnny was one of those that was left.
And to listen to the rest of this podcast, head on over to www.patreon.com/SRB Media. Thank you.